Welcome to Night Whisper. Night Whisper brings you the darkest tales from the shadows. Join our community. Subscribe, leave a like, and prepare yourself for stories that will haunt your dreams. Almost 4 years since it happened, I try to make sense of what happened that night. I've convinced myself it's got to be some sort of wild animal. I convinced myself it could be some lunatic who lives in the woods. I even convinced myself that my own fatigue, booze, and trauma from the accident compromised my own grasp of sanity enough for me to hallucinate the entire encounter. But no one of those explanations would connect with what I've seen, nor would any one of them shed any insight into what was unmistakably the intelligence behind it. And no one of those explanations would get me through my waking hours without waking up with that mangled head of a deer staring at me from the front seats of my vehicle. My name is Mason, and I was 27 when it happened. It was December 2021, right in the middle of the pandemic, and I was working from home as a software engineer out of this little apartment in Burlington, Vermont. I'd been putting in 60-hour weeks, trying to get this project wrapped up before the holidays, and by Christmas Eve, I was running on fumes. My parents lived about 2 hours north of here, up in the sticks near the Canadian border. They had that old farmhouse that had been in my dad's family for 3 generations, surrounded by nothing but trees and mountains for miles around. I had spent every Christmas of my childhood there, and even as an adult I never missed one. Tradition was one thing, and it was home. But that year, other plans awaited me. I was supposed to be out of Burlington by 4 to head to my parents' for dinner. Instead, an emergency Zoom meeting suddenly sucked me in, one which would last nearly 3 hours. It wasn't until I shut down my laptop and grabbed my coat that I realized it was after 6:30 and the sun had disappeared behind the Green Mountains. I remember it well, standing at my kitchen counter, making 2 travel cups of black coffee, watching the snow fall off my window. It had fallen on and off throughout the day, but it had really picked up within the last hour. A winter storm warning took precedence on the weather app on my cell phone. It was forecasted to reach a height of 2 feet by morning. I should have simply stayed home. I can see that now. But what had come to my mind then was the disappointed face of my mother if I didn't show up. So what I could think of then was my father sitting in his armchair by the fire, waiting for me. I thought the roads would be all right. I thought I could drive in worse weather. I was wrong. Well, it's about time I got some practice driving in the winter, I thought. Of course, my impression of winter driving practice is that it should occur in a controlled environment, such as with a driving school or with the guidance of a seasoned driving coach. It definitely should not happen with me navigating through a blinding snowstorm with little practice driving in warm weather conditions. The first hour of my drive wasn't that bad. It was as if the highway had just been plowed and there were enough other vehicles on the road that I could feel somewhat safe. All that changed in an instant when I turned off the highway onto Route 15, driving northeast. There was no one. I eased back to about 30 miles an hour, white-knuckling the steering wheel. My car wasn't exactly designed for driving in this type of weather. I had a 2008 Hyundai Sonata with more than 150,000 miles on it, no anti-lock brakes, and tires that were probably due for replacement about 2 years ago. Every time I stepped on the gas, I could feel the back end of my car trying to get loose on me, I would tell my brother. It was like it had a mind of its own. By 8:30, I still had about 40 minutes of travel to my parents' house, and things were going downhill fast. A very strong gust of wind was blowing, and in the whiteout that had developed in that storm, it was hard to find the road in front of me. I thought that pulling over and waiting was the thing to do, but there was literally no place to pull over to. There were no parking lots, gas stations, or other kinds of stopping points except for the trees that hemmed the road on both sides. I called my dad to say I was going to be late. "Mason, where are you?" His voice was laced with concern. "I'm on 15, maybe half an hour. Roads are pretty rough." "Son, you should have stayed home. They say this storm will only get worse before it gets better." "I know, Dad. I'm being careful. Just take your time, all right? We'll keep dinner warm for you." I hung up and put my attention back on the road. The trees lining either side of it were diminished to shadowy outlines in the heavy sprinkling of snow. My windshield wipers fought to clear my windshield, and I kept having to hunch forward to see what I could. That was my first mistake. There was a stretch of road that curved sharply to the left, something I should have remembered from all the times I'd driven this route before. But in the darkness and the snow, I didn't see it coming until it was too late. I was going maybe 35 miles per hour when my headlights finally illuminated the curve, and I immediately hit the brakes. The car went into a skid. I tried to remember everything I'd ever learned about driving in winter conditions. Don't panic. Steer into the skid. Don't slam the brakes. But my body didn't listen to my brain. I felt the back end of the car swing out to the right, and then I was spinning, completely out of control. The next few seconds felt like an eternity. I remember seeing trees whipping past the windows. I remember the sensation of weightlessness as the car left the road. And then there was impact, a tremendous crash that threw me forward against my seatbelt, followed by the explosive deployment of the airbag. Then, silence. I sat there for what felt like minutes, trying to process what had just happened. My ears were ringing. My chest hurt where the seatbelt had caught me. But when I moved my arms and legs, everything seemed to work. I was alive. I was okay. The same couldn't be said for my car. When I finally managed to push the deflated airbag out of my face and look around, I saw that I'd gone completely off the road and into the woods. The front end of my Sonata was buried in a snowbank at the base of a large pine tree, the hood crumpled like aluminum foil. Steam was rising from somewhere in the engine compartment, mixing with the falling snow. I tried to start the car, but the engine just made a grinding noise and died. I tried again with the same result. The Hyundai was done. I pulled out my phone and checked for signal. 2 bars. Not great, but enough. First, I called roadside assistance. The woman on the line was apologetic but honest. Because of the storm, they were completely overwhelmed with calls. She said she'd dispatch a tow truck to my location, but it could take up to an hour, maybe longer. Then I called my dad. "Mason, what happened? Are you okay?" "I'm fine, Dad. I went off the road, hit a tree." "Jesus Christ, are you hurt?" "No, I'm okay. Just shaken up. But my car's totaled. I called for a tow truck, but they said it could be a while." "Where exactly are you?" I looked around trying to find a landmark. "I'm on 15, maybe 10 miles before the turnoff to your road. There's nothing around here, just woods." "I'm coming to get you. Just stay in your car and keep warm." "Dad, the roads are really bad. Maybe you should—" "I'm coming, Mason. Just sit tight." He hung up before I could argue. I leaned back in my seat and tried to calm my racing heart. The adrenaline from the accident was starting to wear off, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion. I checked the time, 9:15 p.m. If my dad left right away, he could be here in maybe 45 minutes, assuming he didn't run into the same problems I did. I turned on the radio, but all I got was static. I tried a few different stations with no luck. The storm must have been interfering with the signal. So instead, I sat in the darkness, listening to the wind howl outside and the snow tick against the windows. That's when I heard it. At first, I thought it was just the wind, or maybe a branch scraping against the car. But the more I listened, the more certain I became that what I was hearing was footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps, crunching through the snow somewhere nearby. I sat up straighter in my seat, suddenly very alert. My first thought was that maybe someone had seen my accident and come to help. Maybe there was a house nearby that I hadn't noticed in the darkness. "Hello?" I called out, but my voice barely carried over the sound of the storm. I opened the driver's side door and stepped out into the blizzard. The cold hit me immediately, cutting right through my jacket. The snow was already up past my ankles, and the wind was so strong that I had to lean into it just to stay upright. I looked around, squinting through the falling snow, trying to see where the footsteps had come from. But all I could see was darkness. The trees around me were nothing but vague shadows, their branches swaying violently in the wind. "Is someone there?" I called out again, louder this time. No response. Just the wind. I was about to get back in the car when I heard something else. It wasn't footsteps this time, it was different, wetter. It sounded like something eating, like the wet slurping sound of meat being torn from bone. Every hair on my body stood on end. I looked toward where I thought the sound was coming from, a spot maybe 30 feet into the woods, just past the edge of where my headlights were still weakly illuminating the snow. I couldn't see anything clearly, but there was definitely movement there. Something dark, shifting against the white backdrop of the snow. "Hello?" My voice came out as barely a whisper. The sound stopped. For a long moment, there was nothing but the wind and the snow. I stood there frozen, staring into the darkness, every instinct screaming at me to get back in the car. Then I saw something that made my blood run cold. 2 points of light appeared in the darkness. They were too high off the ground to be a dog or a coyote. They were at roughly human eye level, maybe even a bit higher, and they were staring directly at me. I didn't think. I just moved. I threw myself back into the car and slammed the door shut, then immediately hit the lock button. My hands were shaking so badly that it took me 3 tries to get the key in the ignition, even though I knew the car wouldn't start. I sat there in the darkness, breathing hard, staring out at the spot where I'd seen those eyes. But whatever had been there was gone now. There was nothing but snow and trees and endless darkness. Maybe a minute passed. Maybe 5. I don't know. I was too scared to move, too scared to even look away from the window. My phone was in my hand, but I couldn't bring myself to call anyone. What would I even say? That I saw eyes in the woods? They'd think I was crazy. That's when something hit the passenger side window. I jumped so hard that I cracked my head against the roof of the car. The sound had been sharp and sudden, like someone had thrown a rock at the glass. I looked at the passenger window, but it was covered in snow. I couldn't see anything through it. I waited, holding my breath, listening. Nothing. Then it came again. Another impact against the window, harder this time, and then another and another. Someone was throwing things at my car. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, shining it at the passenger window. But all I could see was a thick layer of snow clinging to the glass. Whatever was out there was completely hidden from view. The impacts stopped. For maybe 30 seconds, there was silence. And then I heard the footsteps again. But this time, they weren't distant. They were right outside my car. I could hear them circling around me, first past the passenger side, then around the back, then up along the driver's side. Something was walking circles around my car. I pressed myself against the center console, trying to get as far from the windows as possible. The footsteps continued their circuit, around and around, never stopping. I could hear the crunch of snow with each step, slow and deliberate. And then they stopped. Right outside my driver's side door. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just stared at the door handle, waiting for it to turn. But it didn't. Instead, the footsteps resumed, moving away from the car this time. I heard them receding into the woods, growing fainter and fainter until they disappeared entirely beneath the sound of the wind. I sat there for another few minutes, not trusting that whatever it was had actually left. But eventually my curiosity got the better of me. I needed to know what was out there. I needed to know what I was dealing with. I opened the driver's side door slowly, half expecting something to lunge at me from the darkness, but nothing did. I stepped out into the snow and immediately noticed something that made my stomach turn. There were footprints everywhere. They circled my car exactly as I'd heard them, forming a complete loop around the vehicle. But they weren't normal footprints. They were too large, at least twice the size of my own boots, and they were deeper than they should have been, as if whatever made them was incredibly heavy. I followed the prints with my eyes to where they led away from the car, into the woods, and that's when I noticed the blood. It started as small droplets in the snow, barely visible against the white, but as I followed the trail with my eyes, the droplets grew larger, becoming splashes, then pools. Something had been bleeding heavily, and whatever it was, had gone into the forest. I should have stayed in the car. Every rational part of my brain was screaming at me to get back inside and lock the doors and wait for help to arrive. But something else was driving me now. Maybe it was the adrenaline. Maybe it was some deep, primal need to understand what was happening. Whatever it was, it made me reach into my glove compartment and pull out my 9mm handgun. I always kept it in my car. My dad had taught me to shoot when I was 12, and I'd had my concealed carry permit since I was 21. I'd never had to use it in a real situation before, and I hoped I wouldn't have to use it now. But feeling the weight of it in my hand made me feel at least a little bit safer. I turned on my phone's flashlight and started following the blood trail into the woods. The snow was deep, sometimes up to my knees, and every step was a struggle. The wind cut through my jacket like it wasn't even there. But I kept going, following those massive footprints and that trail of blood deeper into the forest. After maybe 50 feet, the blood trail led to something dark lying in the snow just ahead. At first, I couldn't tell what it was. It was just a dark mass, roughly the size of a large dog, slumped against the base of a tree. I approached slowly, my gun raised, my flashlight illuminating the snow in front of me. It wasn't a dog. It was a deer. Or what was left of one. The animal had been completely gutted. Its stomach was torn open, and its internal organs were scattered across the snow in a gruesome display. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that the deer's head was missing. Not torn off, not bitten off, but cleanly removed, as if someone had taken a saw to its neck. I stood there staring at the carcass, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing. I'd heard of predators killing deer before, wolves, coyotes, even the occasional mountain lion. But none of them could do this. None of them could remove a head so cleanly. This was something else entirely. I swept my flashlight around the surrounding area, looking for the missing head. But it was nowhere to be seen. All I found were more of those massive footprints, leading away from the deer and deeper into the woods. That's when I decided I'd seen enough. I turned around and started making my way back to my car as quickly as the deep snow would allow. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Every shadow seemed to move. Every sound made me flinch. When I finally emerged from the tree line and saw my car ahead, I nearly cried with relief. I hurried toward it, already planning to get inside and lock the doors and not come out until my dad arrived. But as I got closer, I realized something was wrong. The driver's side door was open. I stopped in my tracks, staring at the car. I was certain I had closed the door behind me when I left. I remembered doing it, but now it was standing wide open, snow blowing into the interior. I raised my gun and approached slowly, my flashlight cutting through the darkness. I could see the driver's seat from where I stood. I could see something sitting on it, but my brain refused to process what I was looking at. It wasn't until I was standing right next to the car, close enough to touch it, that I finally understood what I was seeing. Sitting on my driver's seat, positioned as if it had been carefully placed there, was the severed head of the deer. Its dead eyes were staring directly at me. I don't remember the next few minutes very clearly. I know that I ran. I know that I was screaming. I know that at some point I dropped my phone in the snow and had to go back for it. But the details are hazy, like a dream that starts to fade the moment you wake up. What I do remember is headlights. They appeared in the distance, two bright points of light cutting through the blizzard. For one terrifying moment, I thought they might not be real. But then I heard an engine, and I saw the familiar shape of my dad's old Ford pickup truck coming down the road. I ran toward it, waving my arms and shouting like a lunatic. The truck slowed down and stopped, and my dad's face appeared in the driver's side window, his expression a mixture of confusion and concern. "Mason, what the hell are you doing out here? I thought I told you to stay in your car." I yanked open the passenger door and threw myself inside, slamming it shut behind me. My hands were shaking so badly that I could barely buckle my seatbelt. "Dad, we need to go. We need to go right now." "What? Why? What's wrong?" "There's something in the woods. Something was out there. It put a deer head in my car. It was watching me. Dad, please, we need to go." My dad stared at me like I'd lost my mind, and honestly, maybe I had, but something in my expression must have convinced him that I wasn't joking, because he put the truck in gear and started driving toward my car. "Show me," he said. I didn't want to go back. Every fiber of my being wanted to just drive away and never look back. But I knew that if I didn't show my dad what I'd seen, he'd never believe me. So I pointed at my car, which was just barely visible through the falling snow. "It's in there, on the driver's seat." My dad pulled up next to my wrecked Sonata and put the truck in park. He grabbed a flashlight from the glove compartment and opened his door. "Wait here." "Dad, no, don't go out there." But he was already gone, walking through the snow toward my car. I watched through the window as he approached the driver's side door, still standing open, and shone his flashlight inside. He stood there for a long moment, not moving. Then he walked back to the truck and got in. His face was pale. "The head's gone," he said. "What?" "The deer head. It's not there anymore." I stared at him, not understanding. "That's impossible. I saw it. It was right there on the seat." "There's blood on the seat. A lot of it. But no head." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. If the head was gone, that meant something had taken it, and that something was still out there, watching us. "Dad, we need to leave. Now." This time, he didn't argue. We drove to my parents' house in silence. My dad didn't ask me any more questions, and I didn't volunteer any more information. I just sat there in the passenger seat, staring out at the dark forest passing by outside, wondering if those eyes were still watching me from somewhere in the trees. When we finally pulled into my parents' driveway, I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. The house was lit up, warm light spilling from every window. It looked safe. It looked normal. But I didn't feel safe. Not even close. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in my old childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind howl outside. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that deer head staring at me. Every time I started to drift off, I heard those footsteps circling my car. By morning, the storm had passed. The sky was a brilliant blue, and the sun was reflecting off the fresh snow with an almost blinding intensity. It looked peaceful. It looked beautiful. But I knew what was out there, hiding in those trees. And I knew that no amount of sunlight could make me forget what I'd seen. My dad and I drove back to my car later that day to meet the tow truck. In the daylight, the scene looked different, less threatening, just a wrecked car at the base of a tree, surrounded by snow. But the footprints were still there. The tow truck driver noticed them too. He asked if we'd seen any wildlife in the area. My dad said no. I didn't say anything at all. They towed my car to a junkyard. I never saw it again. I thought about calling the police. My dad suggested it more than once. But what would I tell them? That something put a deer head in my car? That I saw eyes in the dark? They'd think I was crazy. Hell, I was starting to think I was crazy. So I didn't call anyone. I just went home after the holidays, back to my apartment in Burlington, and tried to forget that any of it had ever happened. But I couldn't forget. I still can't. Because sometimes, late at night, when the wind is blowing and the snow is falling, I hear footsteps outside my window. And sometimes, when I look out into the darkness, I see 2 points of light staring back at me. That would have been the end of my story, if nothing else had happened. I could have written it off as a traumatic experience, processed it in therapy, and moved on with my life. But 3 weeks after that night in the blizzard, something else happened that made me realize the thing in the woods hadn't forgotten about me. I'd finally started to sleep normally again, The nightmares had faded to once or twice a week instead of every single night. I'd even managed to go a few days without thinking about those footprints, those eyes, that severed head. Then I got a letter. It arrived in my mailbox on a Tuesday afternoon, mixed in with some bills and junk mail. There was no return address. The envelope was plain white, my name and address handwritten in large block letters. Inside was a single photograph. It was a picture of my parents' house. Not a clear shot, but blurry and slightly out of focus, like it had been taken from far away. The house was lit up, just like I remembered it from the night I arrived. And standing in one of the upstairs windows, barely visible through the glass, was a figure. It was me. The picture had been taken that night, the night of the blizzard. Someone had been out there in the woods, watching my parents' house, watching me. I called my dad immediately. I told him about the photograph, described every detail. His voice went quiet in a way I'd never heard before. "Mason," he said, "you need to call the police." This time, I didn't argue. The sheriff's department sent a deputy to take my statement. He was a young guy, probably not much older than me, and he seemed skeptical of everything I told him. He looked at the photograph for a long time, turning it over in his hands, studying it. "And you're sure this was taken that night?" he asked. "Positive. Look at the snow. Look at the lights. That's exactly how it looked when I got there." He nodded slowly, then put the photograph in an evidence bag. "We'll look into it. In the meantime, I'd recommend being careful. Keep your doors locked. Let us know if you receive anything else." I did receive something else. A week later, another letter arrived. Same plain white envelope, same handwritten address, no return information. This time, there was no photograph, just a note, written on a piece of yellow legal paper in the same block letters as the address. It said, "I see you when you sleep." I stopped sleeping after that. I installed cameras around my apartment. I bought a home security system. I started keeping my gun on my nightstand instead of in my glove compartment. I even considered moving, finding a new apartment somewhere far away, somewhere nobody knew me. But I didn't. Something kept me rooted in place. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe it was the irrational belief that if I ran, I'd be admitting that this thing, whatever it was, had power over me. Or maybe I just wanted to know the truth. The third letter arrived 2 weeks after the second. By then, I'd started to anticipate them, checking my mailbox every day with a mixture of dread and morbid curiosity. This time, the envelope was larger, heavier than the others. Inside was another photograph. It showed the interior of my apartment, my living room, to be specific. The television was on, playing some show I didn't recognize. My coffee table was covered with takeout containers and empty beer bottles. And there, asleep on the couch, was me. My blood went cold. The photograph had been taken from inside my apartment. Someone had been in my home while I was sleeping, close enough to photograph me, and I'd never known. I searched every inch of my apartment that night. I checked every closet, every cabinet, under every piece of furniture. I examined the locks on my doors and windows, looking for any sign of forced entry. I found nothing. No scratches, no broken locks, no evidence that anyone had been there at all. But someone had been there. The photograph proved it. I showed the picture to the sheriff's deputy. He seemed more concerned this time, less skeptical. He put me in touch with a detective, and they dusted my apartment for fingerprints, examined my locks, interviewed my neighbors. They found nothing. "Whoever's doing this," the detective told me, "they're careful, very careful." So what do? Stay vigilant, vary your routine. Consider staying somewhere else for a while. I took his advice. I started staying at different friends' houses, never sleeping in the same place twice in a row. I randomized my schedule, never leaving for work at the same time, never coming home at a predictable hour. I became paranoid, suspicious of everyone and everything. But the letters kept coming. The fourth one arrived at my friend Kevin's apartment, where I'd been staying for 3 days. How they knew I was there, I have no idea. The photograph inside showed Kevin's kitchen window, taken from outside. Inside the frame, visible through the glass, were Kevin and me eating dinner. The fifth one arrived at my parents' house while I was visiting. It contained a photograph of my dad's pickup truck parked in the driveway, taken from somewhere in the woods behind their property. The sixth one arrived at my office. I hadn't told anyone where I worked. The photograph showed me sitting at my desk, taken through the window from the parking lot outside. By then, I'd stopped being scared. I was just angry, furious. This thing, this person, had taken over my entire life. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't think about anything else. I was losing weight, losing friends, losing my grip on reality. I decided to fight back. I started leaving my curtains open at night. I wanted them to know I wasn't hiding anymore. I stopped varying my routine. I wanted them to find me. I started going for long walks in the evening, alone, in dark and isolated places. I wanted to confront whatever was stalking me, but nothing happened. The letters stopped coming. Weeks passed without any sign of my tormentor. I started to wonder if maybe they'd gotten bored, moved on to some other victim. Then, on the 1-year anniversary of the night in the blizzard, I received one final letter. The envelope was thicker than usual. Inside were 7 photographs, each one showing a different moment from the past year of my life. Me sleeping, me eating, me driving, me at work, me at my parents' house, me with friends. And at the bottom of the stack, there was one more photograph. It showed the clearing where I'd found the mutilated deer that night. The snow was fresh, untouched, just like it had been a year ago. And standing at the edge of the tree line, barely visible in the darkness, was a figure. It was tall, at least 7 feet. Its limbs were too long, its proportions wrong in ways that made my brain hurt to look at. And its eyes, reflecting the camera flash, were 2 bright points of white light. I stared at that photograph for a long time. Then I burned it, along with all the others. I moved to California a month later. I got a new job, a new apartment, a new life. I don't go into the woods anymore. I don't drive at night if I can help it. And I never, ever look out my windows after dark, because I know what's out there, and I know it's still watching. I've been in California for almost 3 years now. The nightmares have mostly stopped. The paranoia has faded. I've started to feel something like normal again. But last week, something happened that made me realize I was fooling myself. I was at a coffee shop near my apartment, working on my laptop, when I noticed someone staring at me through the window. It was a man, tall and thin, wearing a heavy coat even though it was 70 degrees outside. He was standing completely still on the sidewalk, just watching me. I looked away for a moment, just long enough to save my work and close my laptop. When I looked back, he was gone. That night, I found an envelope under my apartment door. Plain white. No return address. My name handwritten in large block letters. Inside was a photograph of me at the coffee shop, taken through the window. And on the back, written in familiar block letters, were 4 words. I found you again. I haven't told anyone about the new letter. Not my friends, not the police, not my family. What would be the point? Nobody believed me before. Nobody helped me before. I'm on my own with this thing, just like I've always been. But I'm not going to run this time. I've spent the past few days preparing. I installed new locks on my doors. I set up cameras in every room. I bought a bigger gun, a .45 caliber that could stop a charging bear. And I've been practicing at the range every day, putting hundreds of rounds through that thing until I can hit a moving target at 50 feet without even thinking about it. If this thing wants to keep playing games with me, fine. But I'm done being the prey. 2 nights ago, I decided to try something different. Instead of sitting in my apartment waiting for something to happen, I went out looking for trouble. I drove to a remote area in the hills outside the city, parked my car on the side of the road, and waited. It was cold that night, unusually cold for California, with a thick fog rolling in from the ocean. The conditions reminded me of that night in Vermont 4 years ago. I sat there for hours, watching the fog drift between the trees, listening for any sound that seemed out of place. My gun was in my lap, loaded and ready. My phone was in my pocket, 911 already dialed and waiting for me to press send. Around 2 a.m., I heard them. Footsteps. Slow and deliberate, just like I remembered. They came from somewhere behind my car, moving through the underbrush with a steady, unhurried pace. I watched through my rearview mirror, but I couldn't see anything through the fog. The footsteps circled around to the passenger side of my car. Then they stopped. I held my breath, waiting. Something tapped against the passenger window. I spun around, raising my gun, ready to fire through the glass, but there was nothing there. Just fog and darkness. I sat there for another minute, my heart pounding, my finger on the trigger. Then I heard the footsteps again, moving away from the car, back into the woods. I got out. I know that sounds insane. I know I should have just driven away and never looked back. But I'd spent 4 years wondering what was out there, 4 years being afraid of something I'd never even seen clearly. I needed to know the truth, even if it killed me. I followed the footsteps into the fog. They led me through dense underbrush and between towering eucalyptus trees, their bark peeling and white in the darkness. The fog was so thick that I could barely see 10 feet in front of me. But I kept moving, following the sound of those deliberate footsteps. After maybe 5 minutes, the footsteps stopped. I stopped too, listening, trying to figure out where they'd gone. The fog seemed even thicker here, almost solid, blocking out everything except a small circle of visibility around me. That's when I heard the breathing. It was deep and heavy, like an animal panting after a long chase, but there was something wrong with it, something off. It had a rhythmic quality to it, almost like laughter. I raised my gun, pointing it into the darkness. "I know you're there," I said. "Show yourself." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, the fog parted, and I saw it. It was standing maybe 20 feet away, at the very edge of my visibility. It was tall, even taller than I'd imagined, at least 8 feet. Its body was vaguely humanoid, with 2 arms and 2 legs, but the proportions were all wrong. Its limbs were too long, its torso too thin, its head too large for its body, and its eyes, those terrible white eyes, were staring directly at me. I should have run. I should have fired my gun and turned and sprinted back to my car as fast as my legs could carry me. But I didn't do any of those things. I just stood there, frozen, staring at the thing that had been haunting me for 4 years. It tilted its head as if curious about my reaction. Then it opened its mouth. I don't know how to describe the sound that came out. It was like nothing I'd ever heard before, a mixture of animal growls and something almost like human speech. But there were no words, no meaning that I could discern. Just noise, terrible and alien. Then it moved. It was faster than anything I'd ever seen. One moment it was standing 20 feet away. The next, it was right in front of me, close enough to touch. I felt its breath on my face, hot and foul, smelling of rotting meat. I pulled the trigger. The gunshot was deafening in the silence of the forest. The muzzle flash lit up the fog like lightning, and for just a fraction of a second, I saw the thing's face clearly. It wasn't human. It wasn't animal. It was something else entirely, something that shouldn't exist. And it was smiling. The bullet hit it in the chest, but it didn't fall. It didn't even flinch. It just stood there, looking at me with those terrible white eyes, still smiling that horrible smile. Then it reached out and grabbed my gun. I felt its fingers close around the barrel, impossibly strong, impossibly cold. It pulled the gun from my grip as easily as taking candy from a child. Then, it did something I'll never forget. It bent the gun in half. The metal groaned and shrieked as it twisted, folding like paper under the thing's grip. It dropped the ruined weapon at my feet, then leaned in close to my face. I could feel its breath on my skin. I could smell the death on it, and I could see, deep in those white eyes, something like intelligence, something like malice. It spoke. I don't know how. It didn't have lips, didn't have a tongue, didn't have any of the equipment necessary for human speech. But I heard the words clearly, as if they were being spoken directly into my mind. "Not yet," it said. Then it was gone. I don't remember the walk back to my car. I don't remember the drive home. I don't remember anything until I was sitting on my bathroom floor, shaking uncontrollably, staring at the bent barrel of my gun. It let me go. That's what I keep thinking about. It was fast enough to catch me, strong enough to kill me, and it let me go. Why? I've thought about that question every day since. I've run through every possible explanation, every theory, every guess, and I've come to only one conclusion that makes any sense. It's not done with me yet. Whatever this thing is, whatever it wants, it's not finished playing its game. The letters, the photographs, the deer head in my car. It was all part of something bigger, something I don't understand. And the words it spoke, "not yet," they haunt me more than anything else. Not yet means there's more to come. Not yet means this isn't over. Not yet means that someday, when it's ready, it's going to come for me again. I don't know when that day will be. I don't know if I'll be able to stop it when it comes. All I know is that I'm done running. I'm done hiding. Whatever happens next, I'm going to face it head on. Because the alternative is living the rest of my life in fear. And I'd rather die on my feet than spend another 4 years looking over my shoulder. So if you're out there reading this, maybe on a cold winter night, maybe during a blizzard like the one that started all of this, just remember, there are things in this world that we don't understand, things that watch us from the darkness, things that wait. And sometimes they find you. That was the last thing I wrote, 3 months ago. I posted it on a few forums, hoping that maybe someone out there had experienced something similar, had seen the same thing I'd seen. I got a few responses, mostly people calling me crazy or accusing me of making it all up for attention. But I also got one response that stood out. It was a private message from someone who claimed to have had an almost identical experience. Same footprints in the snow, same feeling of being watched, same letters and photographs appearing out of nowhere. But there was one crucial difference. The person said they'd found a way to stop it. They wouldn't tell me the details over message. They said it was too dangerous to put in writing, that there were others like the thing that stalked us who monitored online communications, looking for information about themselves. They said, if I wanted to learn what they knew, I'd have to meet them in person. I was skeptical, of course. For all I knew, this person was a scammer, or crazy, or maybe even the thing itself pretending to be human. But I was desperate. I'd tried everything else. What did I have to lose? We arranged to meet at a diner in Nevada, about halfway between my location and theirs. They said they'd be wearing a red baseball cap and sitting in the booth by the back exit. I drove out there yesterday. The diner was one of those old roadside places, the kind that looks like it hasn't been renovated since the 1970s. There were a few truckers at the counter, a family with kids in a booth by the window, and in the back, just like they said, a person in a red baseball cap. I walked over and sat down across from them. It was a woman, maybe in her 50s, with gray hair and tired eyes. She looked like she hadn't slept in years. She looked like I probably look. "You're Mason," she said. It wasn't a question. Yeah, and you are? My name's not important. What's important is what I'm going to tell you. She looked around the diner, making sure no one was listening, then leaned in close. The thing that's been following you, it's not alone. There are others like it. Dozens, maybe hundreds. They've been here for a very long time, longer than humans have existed on this planet. They live in the wild places, the forests and mountains and deserts where people rarely go. And they feed on us. Feed on us how? Not physically. Not usually anyway. They feed on fear, on paranoia, on the slow, creeping dread that comes from knowing you're being watched but never being able to prove it. The letters, the photographs, the deer head, it's all designed to cultivate that fear, to ripen it. I felt sick to my stomach. And then what? And then, when the fear is at its peak, when you're so terrified that you can barely function, they harvest it. They take it all at once, and the sensation is so overwhelming that most people don't survive. Most people? Some do. Some are able to resist, to push through the fear and come out the other side. Those people, the survivors, they become immune. The things can't feed on them anymore. How? How do you become immune? She reached into her jacket and pulled out a small envelope. Inside was a single photograph. It showed the creature I'd seen in the fog. Those long limbs, that oversized head, those terrible white eyes. But there was something different about this picture. The creature looked injured, weakened, almost deflated. This was taken right after I survived my harvest, she said. The thing came for me, just like it'll come for you. But I was ready. I knew what it wanted, and I refused to give it. I looked into its eyes, and I felt nothing but calm. And when it realized it couldn't feed on me anymore, it retreated. That's it? Just stay calm? It's not as easy as it sounds. The creature has ways of amplifying your fear, of making you see things that aren't there, hear things that aren't real. Most people can't resist. Most people break. But you didn't. No, I didn't. She slid the envelope across the table to me. Keep this. When the time comes, look at it. Remember that someone else faced this thing and survived. Remember that it can be beaten. I took the envelope and tucked it into my jacket. When will the time come? She looked at me with those tired, haunted eyes. Soon. The fact that it spoke to you, that it said not yet, means it's almost ready. Days, maybe. A week at most. I thanked her and got up to leave, but before I could go, she grabbed my arm. One more thing, she said. When it comes for you, it won't be alone. There will be others, watching from the darkness. They feed on the fear of the harvest too, like scavengers waiting for scraps. Don't let them distract you. Keep your focus on the main one, the one that's been hunting you. If you can defeat it, the others will scatter. I drove home with her words echoing in my head. Days, maybe. A week at most. That was yesterday. This morning, I woke up to find a new envelope under my door. Inside was a photograph of me sleeping in my bed, and on the back, written in those familiar block letters, Tonight. So here I am, writing this final update, waiting for the sun to go down. I don't know if I'll survive the night. I don't know if the woman's advice will work. All I know is that I'm done being afraid. I've spent the day preparing. I've meditated. I've gone through breathing exercises. I've looked at the photograph the woman gave me over and over, reminding myself that this thing can be beaten. The sun is setting now. The shadows are getting longer. And somewhere out there, in the darkness that's falling over the city, something is waiting for me. If you're reading this, it means one of two things. Either I survived and posted this as a warning to others who might be going through the same thing, or I didn't survive and someone found this document on my laptop after I was gone. Either way, I want you to know, the things in the darkness are real. They watch us. They follow us. They feed on our fear. But they can be defeated. Stay calm. Stay focused. And whatever you do, don't let them see you afraid. It's over. I survived. The thing came for me last night, just like the woman said it would. It appeared in my bedroom around 3 a.m., materializing out of the darkness like it had always been there. I could feel its presence before I even opened my eyes, that cold, malevolent weight pressing down on my chest. I kept my eyes closed at first, focusing on my breathing, trying to stay calm. I could hear it moving around my bed, could feel its breath on my face. It was trying to scare me, trying to make me panic. I refused. I opened my eyes and looked directly at it. It was inches from my face, those white eyes boring into mine, that terrible smile spreading across its inhuman features. I could see others in the darkness behind it, smaller things with glowing eyes, watching from the corners of my room. But I didn't feel fear. I felt calm. I felt acceptance. Whatever was about to happen, I was ready for it. The creature seemed confused. It tilted its head, studying me, trying to understand why I wasn't reacting the way its victims always react. It leaned in closer, trying to intimidate me. I smiled. "You can't have me," I said. The creature recoiled. It actually recoiled, like my words had physically pushed it away. The smile disappeared from its face, replaced by something that looked almost like frustration. For a long moment, we just stared at each other. Then slowly, the creature began to fade. Its form grew translucent, insubstantial, like smoke dissipating in a breeze. The smaller things in the corners disappeared too, shrinking away into the darkness. And then I was alone. I sat there until morning, not moving, barely breathing. I half expected the thing to come back, to try again. But it didn't. When the sun finally rose and filled my room with light, I knew it was truly over. I don't know if the creature is gone for good, or if it's just moved on to easier prey. I don't know if there are more of them out there, hunting other people who stumble into their territory. All I know is that it's not hunting me anymore. The woman was right. These things feed on fear. And when you take that fear away, when you face them with calm acceptance instead of terror, they have no power over you. I'm posting this story as a warning and as a guide. If you're being stalked by something you can't explain, if you're receiving photographs and letters from an unknown source, if you've seen things in the darkness that shouldn't exist, remember, you're not alone. Others have faced what you're facing. Others have survived. And you can survive too. Just remember, don't let them see you afraid.